Say you've just taken your first astrophoto, or maybe you've just bought your first smart telescope. You pull the image straight out of the device and your first thought is, wow, this looks amazing, but I want to make it even better. You want it to shine when you share it on social media or when you show it to your family and friends. So you start playing around with your phone, with your laptop, with whatever software you have, just trying things out, pushing sliders, experimenting. And honestly, that's a phase everyone goes through. It's completely normal, but when we process this way without much experience, we often end up with images that, let's say, don't exactly align with the more canonical expectations in astrophotography. Now, let me be absolutely clear. This hobby has a strong artistic side. If you want to edit your photo however you like for your own enjoyment or to share with people you care about, that is absolutely valid and you should feel free to do that. But today I want to focus on a different angle, the kinds of mistakes that often show up in images that are being evaluated more critically, for example, in competitions, exhibitions, or by experienced astrophotographers in expert communities. In those contexts, there's a pretty well-defined set of things people look for when judging image quality. So in this video, we're going to talk about some of the mistakes that tend to stand out in those circles and how you can avoid them. Because ultimately, those standards are usually trying to reflect one thing: fidelity to reality. Our photos are images of real objects in space. So even when the processing is artistic, it needs to stay grounded in the data. That balance between aesthetics and truth is what makes an astrophoto really stand out. So let's get right into it. My name is Lutz and you're watching The Space Koala. Let's say you're using your ASI Air live stacking or a smart telescope like the SeeStar or the Dwarf, and you just finished a session. The app shows you a pretty nice image right there on your phone. It is stacked, it looks colorful, maybe even good enough to post. So you think, cool, let's throw that into Snapseed or Lightroom and make it even better. But don't. That image you're seeing, it's a compressed version, usually a JPEG. It's already been processed, stretched, color boosted, and flattened into something that looks nice. But the actual data underneath, it's mostly gone. You have no dynamic range left to work with. If you try to adjust contrast or stretch it more, the image will fall apart. You'll get artifacts, banding, weird color shifts, and it's not your fault. It's just the wrong file. Of course, the best option is always to grab the raw lights, calibrate them, and stack them yourself. That's how you get the most control and the best results. But if you're not ready for that, or if you just don't feel like doing it, it's still perfectly valid to use the stacked FITS file or the TIFF file that most of these apps let you export. That is where the real data lives. That's the one that you can push and process without it turning into a mess. And by the way, one quick heads up, if you open one of those files and it just looks completely black, that is normal. It hasn't been stretched yet, which means that all the dynamic range is still in there, hidden but waiting. That's exactly what you want. In other words, that pretty JPEG on your phone is fine for sharing with friends, but if you're serious about making the image better, don't edit the leftovers, go back to the source. One of the most common beginner mistakes is trying to make the background completely black. And I get it, it seems logical. You're photographing outer space, so you expect the background to be pure black. But here's the simple truth, space is not black. Look through a telescope, any telescope, and the background is never pitch black. It might be dark, but there's always something there. Faint light, atmospheric glow, scattered signal from stars, structures you don't even know you captured. If you force your background to be absolutely black, you're not cleaning up the image, you're just removing real things from it. An enthusiastic beginner will often raise the black point until the background looks good. But what you're really doing is crushing all the faint stuff you worked so hard to capture. You're telling the software everything below this brightness is garbage, when some of that garbage was part of your target. And then the image ends up looking fake. Your nebula or galaxy is just sitting there, sharp and colorful, floating in a blank void. It doesn't feel real because it isn't. There's supposed to be structure in space. There's supposed to be a little bit of variation in the background. If your image looks like you cut out the object and pasted it on a black screen, something went wrong. For example, if I only showed you the version with the pitch black background, you might think it looks good, but the moment you see it next to the real version, it becomes obvious how unnatural the first one actually is. So don't make your background pitch black, not because it's a rule, but because that's not what space actually looks like. The next thing that usually happens when we process our image is we want our object to pop. We want that nebula or galaxy to glow with beautiful, vibrant colors, something that really catches the eye. So what do? We grab that saturation slider and we push it all the way to the right. Or we pull that saturation curve as high as it goes. And at first, it feels like it's working. The reds get redder, the blues get punchier, the image looks more alive. But if you didn't actually capture enough color to begin with, what you're bringing out isn't real detail, it's just digital junk. You get weird patches and unnatural tones and this blotchy mess around your object. It doesn't look richer, it just looks broken. So here's the thing, less is more when it comes to saturation, especially if your data isn't strong. A subtle, balanced image will always feel more natural than one that's been pushed past its limit. Color should support the image, not overpower it. So the story continues. Another thing we tend to do, especially when we're still figuring things out, is treat space like it's just a bunch of galaxies, nebulas, and then a whole lot of white dots, stars. And that's what we try to recreate in our images, perfect little white dots, crisp, circular, bright points of light, sometimes so exaggerated that it starts to look like somebody flicked white paint across a black canvas. But the reality is stars are a lot more interesting than that. They come in different colors, red, orange, blue, white, depending on their temperature, and they have different sizes and brightness levels depending on their distance and physical scale. And when your image preserves all of that, it gives your photo this natural depth and subtle beauty that's hard to describe but easy to feel. Here's the thing, those perfect white dots, they're not actually real. They happen when processing goes too far, either by accident or on purpose. If you push your contrast too hard, you'll blow out the cores of your stars until they all clip to pure white. You can also lose star color when using sharpening tools like the sharpness slider on your phone or the unsharp mask in Astrophoto software. Even more advanced tools like the star sharpness setting in Blur Exterminator can cause this if it's overused. And sometimes people intentionally use tools that force stars into perfectly round, hard-edged circles. The result might look clean at first, but what you're actually doing is removing meaningful data. You're stripping out color, you're erasing subtle variation, you're making all the stars look the same when in reality they're not. This might seem like a small detail, but it makes a huge difference. The varied color and brightness of stars adds richness and balance to your image. When you wipe that out, you end up with something sterile and flat, even if the rest of the image is strong. So let the stars be stars. They don't need to be perfect circles. Let's say you've done everything right so far. You've nailed the stretch. The background looks good. The color is balanced. The stars look beautiful. But now there's some noise in your image and you don't like it. Luckily, we live in a time when denoise tools are incredibly powerful, especially the AI-based ones. Whether you apply them early in your processing or closer to the end, They can take a noisy image and smooth it out to near perfection. And they're very tempting because suddenly even a rough image starts to look clean, polished, professional. But here's the risk. These tools might trick you into thinking they can replace actual imaging time. Why spend 5 hours collecting photons if you can just shoot for 40 minutes and let AI clean up the rest? Well, because the result is not the same, not even close. If I show you two versions of the same image, one that's been properly exposed and one that's been denoised after just a short exposure, you'll see the difference immediately. The denoised version might look smooth, but it lacks depth, texture, and detail. And that's the important part. We don't gather more data just to get rid of grain. We do it so that the telescope can resolve subtle variations in the signal. That's where the finest details live. The longer you integrate, the more real structure you reveal, not just less noise. And here's something else that we tend to forget. A little noise is fine. It's normal. We're capturing the faintest light in the universe. Your brain is much more forgiving of a slightly noisy image than a plasticky one with no texture or dimension. I'm not saying don't use denoise tools. I use them too. They're part of the process now, but a good denoise is the one that you cannot tell has been done. The second it starts looking too smooth, too fake, too perfect, it's already gone too far. So what's on the other side of the spectrum? If we use denoise to make our background smooth, then we want the opposite for our main subject, the nebula, the galaxy, the dust lanes. We want those details to stand out. So we sharpen. Maybe it's on Sharp Mask in your favorite software. Maybe it is the sharpening slider on your phone, or maybe you're using something like Blur Exterminator. All of these tools are designed to increase local contrast, to make small structures more defined. Used well, they work great, but they're also very easy to overdo. And when you push them too far, things start to break down. You don't actually create new detail, but you do exaggerate the edges so much that you distort the real structure underneath. Filaments turn into worms, faint galaxies get reshaped into small circular blobs, dust lanes lose their softness and start looking harsh and unnatural. What used to be real variations in your image now look like digital artifacts. So yes, sharpening tools are useful, but they should be used carefully. If someone can tell just by looking that you cranked up the sharpness all the way, that's a sign that you went too far. The goal is simple: sharpen just enough to support the real structure, not to turn your image into something it's not. Sometimes after doing all the usual processing, color calibration, sharpening, stretching, you still want something to stand out more. Maybe the Horsehead Nebula isn't dark enough. Maybe you want the Squid Nebula to glow a bit more. So you start thinking, what if I just work on that part of the image? And that's where selective processing creeps in. It might be a brush tool in your photo editor. It might be a carefully drawn mask that lets you apply curves or saturation to just one section of the image. On paper, it sounds harmless, even smart, but in practice, it's a trap. When you selectively process faint regions to make them pop, especially in objects like the Squid Nebula, the result often looks like it was drawn on. You'll find tons of examples online where the shape is technically there, but the processing is so aggressive in just that area that it ends up looking fake. You can always tell. The reality is real structures fade into the background. They don't float on top like stickers. When you isolate and boost one area without care for the rest of the image, it breaks the illusion and disconnects your photo from what's actually out there. Now, there are justified uses of masks, especially when used for protection, like keeping stars from blowing out while working on a nebula. But as a rule of thumb, avoid painting or boosting parts of your image in isolation just because you want them to stand out. If you want the squid to pop more, the solution is usually better data and not Photoshop tricks. Once you get used to editing, it's easy to fall into the trap of doing the exact same thing for every single image. Maybe you followed a tutorial or picked up a workflow from someone else, and now it's your checklist. The same steps, the same order, no questions asked. Now, don't get me wrong, some core steps are almost always necessary. Things like color calibration, stretching, and contrast adjustment with curves are pretty universal, but everything else, that really depends on the image. The truth is, not all data is the same. Every target is different. Every night is different. Your images come from different telescopes, different cameras, different skies with varying brightness levels, gradients, and noise. And so they all need to be processed differently. That's why copying the exact same sequence for every image doesn't work. Some steps just don't apply. Others might actually do more harm than good. If you're just getting started, it is totally fine to try out workflows from tutorials or guides. You're supposed to do this, that's how you learn. But over time, your goal should be to move beyond the fixed checklist and actually understand why you're doing each step. The best workflow isn't the one that you memorize, it's the one you adapt, one that responds to your data. That's how you're going to get the most out of your images. So you've stretched your image, you fixed the stars, you balanced the colors, you did everything you could, and still you want just one final push, something to really make it pop. And at that point, it gets very tempting to ask ChatGPT for help. There are a couple ways that people use it for astrophotography, and both of them can go very wrong. The first one is uploading your image and asking it to improve it. And yes, this is a thing people do. You feed your image to ChatGPT or some other generative model, and what you get back looks stunning, super clean, perfectly colored, sharp, way better than what you started with. But here's the problem. That's not your image anymore. These tools don't improve your photo. They generate something new from scratch. They invent detail, reshape structures, and output whatever they think a nebula or galaxy is supposed to look like. There are even people who uploaded a picture of cats, claimed it was Andromeda, and got back a fake galaxy because the model doesn't care what you give it. It's just making stuff up. This is an enhancement. It is fabrication. Seasoned astrophotographers will immediately see the difference, but more importantly, if you do this to your images, you may as well just sell your telescope because the data you gathered ends up being thrown out. I made a whole video about this and I'll link it below if you want to see how obvious this can be once you know what to look for. Now, another way people try to use ChatGPT is by asking it for image processing advice. Stuff like, how do I bring out more contrast in this nebula? Or how do I make my stars smaller? And sure, it will give you answers, but it just tells you whatever you want to hear. Even if it makes no sense or doesn't actually work, you might get a list of steps that sound good on paper, but when you follow them, you realize it was just confidently wrong the entire time. The model is designed to answer your question in a feasible way, not to validate if it's technically correct or even possible. The one area where ChatGPT is useful in astrophotography is when you're doing something like writing pixel math expressions, working with scripts, or automating tasks. It's great at generating code and helping you with the technical side of things. But when it comes to editing your actual image, that's your job because you're the one that captured the data. You know what's real, what's noise, what you want to do. No AI model can make those decisions for you. And if you let it, you're no longer showing your astrophotography, you're just reposting a guess. One of the fastest ways to lose your passion for this hobby is comparing your photos, your skies, your gear, your progress to what you see online. It always starts innocently. You're proud of the first photo that you took, so you go online looking for others like it. And suddenly you're buried in images from people shooting under pristine world one skies with $20,000 telescopes and 60 hours of integration time on the same target that you just tried for 1 hour between the clouds. And that's when the doubt creeps in. Why doesn't my photo look like that? What am I doing wrong? Maybe I'm just not good at this. But here's the truth. There will always be somebody with darker skies, someone with better weather, better luck, more experience, more time, or more expensive gear. If you make those the benchmark for your success, you'll never feel like you're enough, and that will kill your motivation faster than any technical challenge ever could. This is a long game, a personal journey, and the only comparison that makes sense, the one that will actually help you grow, is with your past self. If today's image is better than your last one, then you're doing great. Astrophotography isn't about winning, it's about learning to see what's up there. And every night you spend under the stars brings you closer to that. Sure, the hobby can be frustrating. It takes time, patience, and things often go wrong. But honestly, if I get to spend a quiet night under the stars, even if the images don't work out, I still count that as a win. We're in it because we love space, and that's what keeps us going. So those are 10 mistakes that I think are really worth being aware of, especially if you're just starting out with astrophotography processing. It is incredibly easy to fall into some of these traps. I know I've made most of them myself, and in many cases, I just wish someone had told me earlier what to look out for. Getting constructive criticism in this hobby is really difficult. So if someone takes the time to give you thoughtful input, appreciate it. It's rare and it's one of the best ways to improve. That's what this video is really about, not nitpicking anyone's images, but helping each other get better. So I'd love to hear from you guys. What are some mistakes you've seen often, or something you've done and later realized you could have done it differently, better? At the end of the day, astrophotography is a blend of technique, judgment, and some restraint. If we understand where things can go off track, we can make more confident choices in processing. And remember, when we try to push beyond what the data actually supports, that's when the results actually suffer. Thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one, and I wish you clear skies.